Okay, folks, the United States Senate has, right before the midterm elections, I will point out, voted to allocate approximately $270 million and hire 50 additional FBI agents with about 100 additional support staff to protect the United States government, incorporated, their interest in protecting the integrity of the banking system. They release this, you might hear some puppies. I got some puppies under the old wood shed. We're in the wood shed today. They have decided to, right before the midterm elections, roll out to the American public that, oh, look at us. We've allocated $270 million and going to hire a handful of new FBI agents and a handful of support staff to investigate what's being reported as 5,000 new bank fraud cases and mortgage fraud cases that are being reported to the government every month. 5,000 cases every month. Now, here's the problem that I have. According to Renee Powers, when William Wagner broadcast and interviewed the California 18, his privileges to broadcast from the studio were cut down to 1 day a week. He was retaliated against. And that's, I suppose it's true. But let's move on to the real issue here. Back when I began blowing the whistle and going to senators and congressmen and government meetings, and when I went to the press and when I went to the television news broadcasters back in the 1980s. In the 1980s, I began to expose the savings and loan and the banking system fiasco, which has been raging ever since. In the 70s and the 80s, they stole hundreds of billions. And then through the 90s into the period of time when the bubbles all started popping in 2006, 7, and 8, they went on to steal trillions. Now, folks, let me get real here. I've got a problem with the way Chuck Schumer and the U.S. Senate and Congress and the Justice Department handle these matters, and I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about. The bankster gangsters that suckered myself and over 150 other landowners, that suckered over 150 other homeowners outside of Conroe, Texas, and thousands, hundreds of thousands more all over the state of Texas. And then there were millions, and to this day, they're adding complaints, people complaining about this, about 5,000 cases a month. This is how the United States government deals with the massive corruption at the heart of this giant financial fiasco. They go after the whistleblowers. Not only do they go after the whistleblowers, but they never go after the perpetrators. All they do is protect the government's interests. They protect the government's image and never go after the politicians and the law enforcement agents and all of the people that are getting bought and paid for and, paid off by the perpetrators. Case in point. Case number 17870, I think it was. 17189. It's my case in Harris County. Houston. It's my case against the Federal Depositors Insurance Corporation. They waltzed into Judge Russell Lloyd's court and lied. The United States government came into the case Witham versus Western Bank, FDIC, and they lied to the court. They said that the people that had perpetrated these frauds and crimes were bankrupt and they didn't have any money, and so Judge Russell Lloyd shut down my case. And this case reflected a lot of other people that had been swindled and bamboozled in these financial schemes. Well, come to find out, the people that are operating the bank are multi-billionaires. They have real estate all over the world, palaces in Monaco on the French Riviera. They got palaces in Switzerland and palaces in London. They got vast tracts of real estate all over the United States. They own commercial properties all over the United States. And the group behind the Western Bank, multi-billionaires. They're so wealthy, you can't even count their money. But they came into the courtroom and lied about everything, and the government shut my case down and protected them. The government, Senator Charles Schumer and Christopher Wray, this $270 million additional dollars, and another 50 agents with support staff of about 100 more employees, all that $270 million is going to get sucked up by the FBI. And all they're going to do is they're going to protect the government's interests, and they're going to protect the FDIC and the other insurance programs that insure these loans. Now let's get real, Senator Chuck Schumer. Let's get real, Donald Trump. And Christopher Wray, this message is directly to you and to Jeff Sessions. The Western Bank Corporation in Houston, Texas, was so magnificently wealthy when they walked into the courtroom and lied, claiming that they were insolvent. And then, of course, the government, the FDIC, Catherine Woolford. Catherine Woolford is the main witness in this whole thing. The Western banks and a lot of the other banks that were shut down in the 80s and 90s, they weren't insolvent. They protected the FDIC's insurance funds. They shut down the cases, they shut down the banks, and then they covered up what actually happened. And that's what's going on right now. So to Renee Powers and Latasha Richardson, and to this lady, I can't even pronounce her name, over in Salt Lake City. She's got the FBI out of Sandy, or Jordan, South Jordan, and the police and the prosecutors in South Jordan. Apparently this woman's being retaliated against for being a whistleblower. Well, I can tell you with absolute certainty that I was massively retaliated against, William Wagner. And by the way, William Wagner, my parents, Clifford and Anita Witham, were massively retaliated against in New York back in the 1960s and the 1970s when they exposed how Lake Champlain was being massively poisoned, and how to this very day they're still flushing that toilet. They're flushing old Lake George up and down to get rid of